It's the mausoleum creep, it's the
We're live. We are live. So Senate Government Operations, it's Friday, April 15th. Fortunately, we're not all scrambling to get our taxes done, or we don't have to scramble. We could if we wanted to, but we don't have to today. So today we've had, and I apologize to anybody who had looked at our schedule earlier in the week and thought we were going to be doing specific things today. I think that we had talked about doing the Code of Ethics and the Office of Professional Regulation, and then tomorrow doing a walkthrough of a Department of Corrections bill. But things change rapidly at this time of the year. And so we need to address, normally the Pay Act comes in a separate bill, and we take that up. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the Pay Act is what regulates the pay of our state employees. And this year, last year we had a full Pay Act bill, and we addressed it and made our recommendations to the Appropriations Committee, because they are in fact the ones that appropriate the money. But it was only funded for 1 year. So it's usually a 2-year funding process. But so this year the portion that deals with the Pay Act came through in the House Appropriations Bill, which I believe is I have it written down here. Amron, do you want to tell me which? H439. Is that right? Okay, thank you. And so we are going to make changed our schedule because apparently we need to give our recommendations to the Appropriations Committee by tomorrow, so that they can, they want to vote out the big bill by Tuesday. So we're going to address the Pay Act today. And what we'll do is have Amron walk us through it. And I do apologize. We tried to figure out a way of just forwarding to us the section of the bill, because it's like a 175-page bill, and I didn't want to print that out. Tried to forward just the section that applies to the Pay Act, and my printer wouldn't let me separate it and just print that. So it is, we'll have Amron walk us through it, and she'll tell us which pages to go to. It is posted, the bill is posted on our website, and she'll tell us where to go, which page to go through. So with that, I think we'll start with Amron and walk through here. First of all, Merrill Hardy, I don't believe you've ever been in our committee before. Is that right? Not. And am I saying your name right? Is it Merrill Hardy or Hardy Merrill?
It's actually Hardy Merrill, and it's hard to tell with my name. So no offense taken. Certainly, I'm the Director of Budget and Management Operations, which is one of 2 divisions of the Department of Finance and Management.
Okay, great.
And typically, my department does not have a lot to do with the Pay Act calculations that we'll be reviewing. This year is a bit of an exception, as there are so many exceptions this year, and that's related to the calculation of a health and dental benefit.
Okay, we're gonna. I don't mean to interrupt you, but sure. We're gonna take your testimony later. I just wanted to introduce you to us.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You're very excited about getting into this, I can tell. And there is a period in your name as it appears on the screen, because that's how you are Hardy Merrill, hardy.merrill@vermont.gov. And so I thought it was a comma. So pardon me. But so we'll introduce ourselves because you're not usually here. Beth and Harold are very familiar with us and need not be introduced to us again. But I'm Jeanette White from Windham County.
I'm Anthony Polina from Washington County.
Brian Collimore representing Rutland County.
Allison Clarkson representing the Windsor District.
And we will be joined by Senator Keisha Ram, who is testifying before another committee, and she's from Chittenden County. So with that, what I'd like to do is have Amron start, and walk us through, and then we'll hear from you, Hardy, about your role and why finance and management is weighing in this year. And then from Beth and Harold, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Emran?
For the record, Ameren Abergele Legislative Council. We are looking at H439, Section F, which begins on page 170.
Oh my
For those
gosh, how do we
following
get,
along.
how do we get there so fast? I mean, it's hard to zip through it.
Yeah,
Oh, geez, I mean,
I will give
lost.
everyone a moment to get there.
yeah, I'm currently on page 19. That's how long it takes my computer to get through this.
And what page did you say, Emran, again?
170.
Wait a minute, maybe if I do this, it'll go faster. Oh, yeah.
Oh, does that help? I can't make it go fast enough.
If you do it on the side, on
I
that little
know,
side bar
I
and pull
can't
it
get it.
down.
Do it.
Oh,
Well, oh, geez. And I keep losing it.
Senator Polina and I also.
I know, but you're wizards.
I keep losing it because oh, anyway.
So if it gets too noisy, let me know and I will mute myself. They are chipping some trees next door to me.
Sorry, Amarin, I keep, what page again?
170.
170, okay.
You're looking for Section F.
Almost there.
Ah, I'm there. Okay. So as soon as Senator Clarkson gets there, we'll start.
Okay, I am there.
Okay, great. Emran, would you
all
like
right.
to take over?
Yes. So this language is language for the most part that was carried over from last year's budget bill back when it was a 2-year budget bill before it got moved into the big bill for just the first year. So this may look very familiar if you saw the 2-year Pay Act bill last year. So beginning with Section F 100, this is on page 170. This section fully funds the collective bargaining agreement between the state and the Vermont State Employees Association and the Vermont Troopers Association. And this is specifically for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. This would include a 1.9 step increase and a 2.25 overall increase for a total of a 4.15 increase. And this again is the same set of numbers that you would have seen last year. Section F101 on page 171 provides that the executive branch exempt employees may receive a salary increase not to exceed 4.15 for fiscal year 2022, which begins on July 4th, 2021. Again, this is consistent with what is permitted under the bargaining agreements. In section F102, and I should say, please, Madam Chair, if you wouldn't mind interrupting me if people have questions. I can't see because I'm working off of one screen.
And I would say the same thing, committee members, if you have questions as we're going through, I also can't see you right now without switching back and forth because I'm working on one screen. So just speak up, please.
I think I know the answer, Madam Chair, but I'll ask it anyway, just so I
Sure.
know for sure. Are the two groups called out, the VSEA and the troopers, because they're different bargaining units? Is that why?
They are different bargaining contracts, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Section F102, this section provides that for determining annual salary adjustments, special salary increases and bonuses under Title 32 1003B and 1020B, the average rate of adjustment available to classified employees under the bargaining agreement shall be in fiscal year 2022, 4.15%. In section F.
Sorry, Madam Chair, can I
Yes.
just call it out? I didn't know we gave bonuses in state government, and it seems like a very private sector thing. But also, this is exempt. This is exempt employees that we had just done, right? And they got a 4.15% salary increase. So I guess I'm not clear on what this is. I mean, this is also exempt employees. So I guess I just need clarity on how 102 is different from 101.
Yes, and it may be helpful if I look at those.
And also just explain bonuses, because I didn't know anybody in state government got bonuses.
Right. So this concerns exempt department heads, but the annual salary adjustments and special salary increases and bonuses that they're entitled to is attached to the average rate of adjustment available to classified employees. So it's a reference saying they can't, for those positions, you can't exceed the average rate of adjustment available to classified employees under the bargaining agreement, which for this purposes is 4.15%.
I may be mistaken here, but I think that the 101 refers to exempt employees who are, they can be many different people. They could be some attorneys or other exempt people. And this specifically refers to secretaries and commissioners and the like. And maybe Beth, could you
Explain the bonus piece.
No, but is that the difference between these two sections in terms of who it's referring to?
Hi, this is Beth Fastige, Commissioner of Human Resources. So those sections refer to both the same groups of employees, all exempt employees.
Okay.
And one talks about the regular raises that they are able that they are able to receive, and it's not to exceed what is provided to the classified employees. So typically Secretary Young will determine what type of increase exempt employees will get, and it can't exceed that now. There have been times when secretaries have decided to not give that maximum amount. They've given a lower amount, but that's up to, and it's at the Secretary of Administration's discretion on what those type of increases would be. And it's included two components, and one is that cost of living, or we call it across the board increase component, which is that 2.25%. And then the other component is the 1.9%, which is the average value that employees would get in a step increase. So the next section is related to exempt employee bonuses, and that includes all exempt employees, including attorneys. And if they were to get a bonus that year, those, of course, also would not be able to exceed for that 4.15%. So it sets a cap on what the administration can do to incent employees. With respect to employee bonuses, actually both classified and exempt employees are able to get bonuses.
Okay. Great. So everyone's able to get a bonus.
Provided Pay Act is approved for exempt employees. Classified employees would potentially would be able to get bonuses whether or not the Pay Act was approved as part of the pay plan, the regular pay plan. So there are ways for classified employees to get bonuses as well.
Thank you. And thank you. And okay. I'll figure out my question.
I can say that bonuses in state government are not similar to bonuses that you might receive in the private sector. Sometimes bonuses in the private sector are a big component of someone's. That's not the case. They're usually much smaller amounts than you might see in the private sector.
Right. And are they generally tied to performance or exceeding expectation? Or
Yes. Yeah.
And I think a few years ago, we allowed a bonus for employees who came up with cost savings ideas or things like that.
Yeah, and there's, and typically agencies and departments may have their own, we call it a merit policy that the classified employees would be eligible for. And there's an overarching one in each department, and an individualized one as well.
Are we ready to move to 103?
Thank you, Beth.
All right, section F103, which begins on page 172. This overall, I would describe this section as housekeeping in nature. It's clarifying some language within subsection A. You'll see the language is moved from subdivision 3 back up towards the top. This is not to change how the process currently works, but to better reflect how the process does work. And then moving into, you'll see from page 172 to 173, you'll see some striking of the language of the total. The consensus was that not exceeding the average rate of adjustment is a more precise description of the adjustment that's used, and of the total just adds extra language that is unnecessary. This was language that was within the budget, within the Pay Act bill last year. And so it is being carried over this year because it did not make it into the budget bill last year. So that goes down through towards the bottom of page 173. In section F104, this section increases the elective state officer salaries and department and agency head salaries in statute by 4.15%. You'll see beginning on page 174, striking the language concerning the annual salary as of July 7th, 2019 from the statute, and adding a new column for the annual salary as of July 4th, 2021. And this goes down through to page 177 and into 178. And then in section F105, this section increases the salary for officers of the judicial branch. Similar to the previous section, you'll see that it's striking the annual salary as of July 7th, 2019, and adding the annual salary as of July 4th, 2021. And that goes through on the bottom of page 178 into page 179. This is again an increase of 4.15%. In section F106, this would change the salary for assistant judges again by 4.15% to put in the salary as of July 4th, 2021 into statute and remove the prior 2019, the salary as of July 7th, 2019 from statute.
Ameren, may I ask a question?
Yep.
Where are the probate judges?
We are about to get to the probate
Oh,
judges.
okay, great. Because we had this discussion yesterday, so I just wanted to make sure there they are, 107, their own.
That's right. So in section F107, this would increase the salary of probate judges by 4.15%, adding an annual salary as of July 4th, 2021 to statute, and removing the annual salary as of July 7th, 2019 from statute. And that goes through onto page 181. Next is section F108.
Sorry, I hate to be a pain, but may I just ask a question?
Yep.
Are probate there? It's a full-time job, right?
No, not for everybody.
Okay. Yes, because that's what these salaries look like, that they're only half-time for some people. Is that what we can assume, given the difference, the disparate nature of these salaries?
You know, maybe somebody can help me out here. I can't remember what it was based on. I believe it is, I don't remember if it was based on population or, but there's a formula that for both these and for the sheriffs. Do you remember, Ameren or Beth, how that formula is derived, or Harold?
We don't. I think that would be probably important to have Patricia Gable testify on this bill, because one of the contracts to support would be the contract between the VSEA and the judiciary as well. So you may want to have her actually come in and testify.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, they are the biggest discrepancy of any that we've seen so far. So I'd love an explanation as to why that is.
And I'm sure that she has the complete understanding of that and can provide that information.
I'm sure. I mean, these things don't happen out of thin air. I mean, there's a reason for them. I just
Right,
like-
and there's always been that discrepancy between Essex and Chittenden, for example, and it is a formula. And so we can have Pat just tell us what that formula is.
Well, yeah, it's huge, the range. So
Right. But if you look at the population of Essex and Chittenden, there's a huge range there.
But working and your time and your effort has no proportion to your population necessarily. I mean, you could be working full time in a smaller county and still be working full time, or not. You're only working half time.
It also says that it says the compensation for the probate judge of Chittenden County shall be full-time service, which implies that others may not be full-time.
Right. That's why I'd love an explanation, because for $16,000 a year, they must be working, a day a week.
Yeah, I think it points to the workload.
Well, we'll find out.
Well, we'll find out. There is a formula for probate judges and there's a formula for sheriffs, and it's been in effect for a long time, and I have never heard anybody complain about it, but we will find out what it is. Okay.
Great.
All right, section F108 increases the salaries for sheriffs. You'll see it's divided between all counties except Chittenden in subsection A, and then followed by the sheriff of Chittenden County. Again, this is a 4.15% salary increase. In section F109, this would increase the state's attorney's salary by 4.15%, changing statute to remove the annual salary as of July 7th, 2019, and add an annual salary as of July 4th, 2021. And that is on page 182, moving into page 183. The next section, F111, just to note that there is a numbering issue here. It goes from F109 to F111. I confirmed with joint fiscal, this just seems to be a bit of a typo in the section numbering. There was not any section removed, just to be clear from the previous draft that was over in House Government Operations. So F111 is Pay Act appropriations. You'll see subsection A is the executive branch. This would fund the second year of the 2-year agreements between the state and the VSEA's contracts between the Defender General, non-management, supervisory, and corrections bargaining units, and for purposes of the appropriation, the state's attorney's office's bargaining unit for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, as well as the collective bargaining agreement with the Vermont State Troopers Association for that same time period. And lastly, would cover salary increases for employees in the executive branch not covered by the bargaining agreements. And subdivision 1 outlines fiscal year 2022. You'll see there's a general fund appropriation in the amount of $10,033,806. And in subdivision B, in the transportation fund, the amount of $4,250,000 is appropriated to the Secretary of Administration for distribution to the Agency of Transportation and the Department of Public Safety. In subdivision C, other funds, the administration shall provide additional spending authority to departments through the existing process of excess receipts to fund the fiscal year 2022 collective bargaining agreements and the requirements of this act. The estimated amounts are $15,775,278 from a special fund, federal funds, and other sources. Subdivision D is transfers. With regard to, I believe that should be with regard to the possible availability of other funds for fiscal year 2022. The Secretary of Administration may transfer from various appropriations and various funds and from the receipts of the Liquor Control Board such sums as the Secretary may determine to be necessary to carry out the purposes of this act. And subdivision 2, this section shall include sufficient funding to ensure administration of exempt pay plans authorized by Title 32, Section 1020, subsection C. Subsection B on page 185 is for the judicial branch. Subdivision 1, the Chief Justice of the Vermont Supreme Court may extend the provisions of the judiciary's collective bargaining agreement to judiciary employees who are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement. Subdivision 2, the second year of the 2-year agreements between the state and the Vermont State Employees Association for the Judicial Bargaining Unit for July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, and salary increases for employees in the judicial branch not covered by the bargaining agreements. And that will be funded by in the amount of $978,648, which is appropriated from the general fund to the judiciary. I will note that the amounts in the appropriation section that we're going through now, these have varied slightly from the numbers that were in the 2-year Pay Act bill at the beginning of last session. These numbers have been updated based on more newer information, is my understanding.
But the numbers, the actual budget numbers have been increased, but there was no increase in the amount of the increase, the 1.9 step and the 2.25 COLA, right?
Correct.
That remains as bargained.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then subsection C, the legislative branch for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. The General Assembly shall be funded in the amount of $399,630 from the general fund. The last section of the Pay Act language is F112. This is an
Sorry,
author.
can I just ask a question about section C?
Yep.
Yes.
I don't know what that's paying for, given that that's, if you divide that by 180 people, it's a very modest amount. It's like $2,200. So what is that paying for there?
It's paying for the increases.
It's paying for the increases. Got it. Thank you.
Is that not the way this works?
It doesn't say that.
Well, that's the way the Pay Act works,
It
though.
doesn't say what the increases are.
The increases are 4.15.
Right, but it says it in every other section. It just doesn't say it here. Is there a reason for that?
I
don't think it says
don't
it
know.
in the other.
This was the language that was in the prior
Okay.
bill. I didn't look too closely at that. There was additional language in last year's bill because there was you may recall there was a change to the statute
Right.
for legislators. So it may have been there was additional detail in that bill, and so it wasn't maybe necessary to put in that specific percentage language in here. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Well, if you look at
Just
B, under judicial branch, it doesn't say it's a 4.1 what the increase is. It says what the budgetary need is to fund this act.
Right, but in previous sections, Senator White, it has identified that there is no previous section in the legislative branch.
Oh, I see. Because I think Ameren is right that it was in that didn't need to be in here this year but I may be wrong.
I'd just love to make sure that it is what that is. Okay, great.
All right, so I will, if you would like, I can follow up with the Joint Fiscal Office. That might be helpful. I don't have any more specifics about where the number came from, but.
Well, it's. I think that the concern is that last year there was a section. The legislature has always only gotten the 2.25 0.25 increase. It's never gotten the full bargained increase. And that last year there was a change so that the legislature, not the legislative branch, but the legislature members themselves now get the full 4.15 or whatever is bargained.
Right.
And I think that's,
yeah.
And I think that's what Senator Clarkson is referring to, that just to make sure that that stayed in there so that
because
that's been an issue for many years.
It has been, and it just needs to be clarified. And we also took nothing last year. So I think we're right.
I should note that the language that was changed last year is contingent upon, so the adjustment is going to be consistent with the compensation increases provided to other constitutional officers.
Right.
So that is the link.
Okay, great.
In section F112, this is a new section. This was not in last year's Pay Act bill. This is a one-time payment authorization. In subsection A, the executive branch is authorized to provide elected state officials whose salaries are set pursuant to Title 32, Section 1003, state officers who did not otherwise receive a salary increase in fiscal year 2021, a one-time cash payment equivalent to the value of a 1.9% increase on their fiscal year 2020 salary. And then similarly, in subsection B, the judicial branch is authorized to provide judicial officers whose salaries are set pursuant to Title 32, sections 1003, and then 1141 and 1142. These are all the judges and judicial officers who did not otherwise receive a salary increase in FY21, a one-time cash payment equivalent to the value of a 1.9% increase on their fiscal year 2020 salary. All of the Pay Act language sections in here are effective on July 1st, 2021, with the exception of this last section, which is effective upon passage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So how do we appropriate the benefits? Because this is just salary, right? This isn't benefits. So where do we account for and appropriate the benefits?
You mean the cost of what this, well, there's an appropriation that is put in to cover the cost of the state's contribution to the retirement system.
No, but I mean,
it's not.
I mean, current benefits. I mean, healthcare benefits. I mean, there
Okay.
are benefits that are paid in addition to everybody's salary, except for us. We don't get any benefits, but everybody else gets benefits. Where do we appropriate that? I'm just curious.
Beth, do you, I think that's in the regular budget, but.
It's in the regular budget.
So it is not considered part of the Pay Act, even though benefits
Correct.
negotiated.
Correct. Pay Act is just about pay.
Okay.
Benefits are
pay.
included in the regular, they're included in the regular base budget. So any increases, if we were having an increase in healthcare costs for the next fiscal year, which we hopefully do not intend, we don't have any, for calendar year 21, the healthcare, our healthcare costs are not increasing. But if they were in the budgets that would be proposed, we would include that increase in the department's base budget.
So for everybody but the legislature, the benefits on top of the salaries that are listed here in the Pay Act are roughly an additional what percent, Beth?
I'm going to defer that to Harold Schwartz, the DHR Director of Operations.
Can I make a guess? 35%.
I would guess 39.
Harold, do you have an answer? You are muted, Harold.
Trying to unmute here. We have some data on this in the workforce report. And total benefits are now roughly 50% of pay.
Wow.
So in addition to what we are looking at here, roughly, a rough guesstimate is that they're getting additional 50% in compensation through benefits.
I would say no. What the Pay Act is about is just the increase in compensation. Okay, I'm not talking about the increase in benefits. I'm talking about benefits are 50% of pay in general for classified employees. Okay, Pay Act is just about the 4% increase to salaries.
Right, but what Senator White and I are asking is, on average, what percent of salaries, I mean, what additionally are people paid in, I mean, it's a compensation package. Pay is, salary is part of it, benefits are a part of it.
Yep, and I'm saying that benefits, including health, the cost to the state for health insurance, for the state share of health insurance, for the dental insurance, for a couple of smaller other programs, and for the retirement contribution is about 50% of the pay cost.
So if your salary is $10,000, the actual benefit that you're getting is about $1,500, but people don't actually get that money. I mean, 15,000. I didn't mean 1,500.
I was going to say it's another 5,000.
Right.
So the compensation package would be 15,000, of which 5 was benefits.
Yes, about 50%. But remember, the Pay Act doesn't have anything to do with that at all. And the Pay Act is just here because there is a base, my understanding is that there's a base budget that are for salaries for state employees and at all levels. And then this is what we have to pass in order to fund any increases that were negotiated.
Right. I get that. I'm just, it just, as given the work that HR is going through in terms of looking at compensation and what do you call them? Your different
Classifications.
Classifications. I mean, it just as we're looking at this holistically, I'm just trying to get a sense of all these salaries we just saw. In addition, they are getting compensated an additional roughly 50%, some of which they won't see until they retire, some of which they'll see every time they go to the dentist. I mean, these are valuable. I mean, it's just I'm trying to get a sense of the whole compensation package. That's all.
Yep.
We can send you a link to the workforce report, and
we have it. We have it, I think, on our website.
And there's a specific table about total compensation, and you can see the relative proportion of the benefits to the pay on that specifically for FY20.
Thank you, Harold.
Sure.
Much appreciated.
So, Amron, was that the end of your section here? Okay,
That was the end.
So, any other questions for Amron at this point? And then we'll jump to Hardy and find out and I think I know why it's different this year, but if you would weigh in. You're muted if you're talking.
I'm sorry, were you waiting for me to weigh in now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were waiting for other questions. So the reason I'm here to provide testimony is to actually, I'll clarify some of the earlier statements, which are Pay Act does not apply to increases in benefits costs, which are based in the base budgets earlier in this large document, H439. However, the Pay Act appropriation amounts that were just reviewed for the 3 branches, actually, the calculations of those appropriation amounts actually do take into account some benefits cost decreases that we're planning on for fiscal year 22. And what those cost decreases are related to are the fact that the state plans to take for the first 2 pay periods of fiscal 22 to take what's called health and dental benefits premium holidays. And I'm not sure if the committee has been briefed on this subject before, and since it doesn't appear directly in the black and white of the Pay Act language here, that's what I'm here to help try to explain. So is some explanation on the benefits premium holiday necessary for the committee?
It isn't necessary for me, but does anybody else need to know what that we mean by holiday?
I know what a holiday is and I know what a premium is, but I'm not sure I understand fully how they.
Okay, why don't you explain that? Harvey?
So I'll jump in, and so this is really, I'm not a subject matter expert in terms of the insurance side of things, but in terms of building the numbers into the budget is where I come into play. And so what I can explain is that the health and dental plans for the state are sort of like self-funded insurance plans. So we reserve premium amounts. We're not actually paying premium to a third-party insurance carrier, but what we're doing is setting funds aside and putting them in a fund to pay for health and dental expenses. And the way our plans work for health, the state contributes 80% of the calculated cost that actuaries tell us to reserve, and the employees contribute 20%. For dental, it's 100% contributed by the state with no contribution by the employee. Now, what happens is in federal audit, for federal audit purposes, our fund balances have actually gotten too high. And while you typically wouldn't think of fund balances reserved for claims expenses, you would think, well, they can't be too high. The more that you have, the better. Where the issue comes in is in federal auditing. If they see fund balances higher than they need to be, they're concerned that they're basically being overcharged. So just as the state, for positions funded out of general fund, for instance, the general fund is paying for those 80% shares of health benefits. If you've got a position that's funded by federal funds, then it's actually the federal government that's picking up those 80% health contributions. And the reasons for those fund balances getting larger have to do with a number of different factors. One of those being there was less utilization of healthcare. So employees were not utilizing healthcare as much during the pandemic, which means that not as much was coming out of the funds, but the same amount is still going in each pay period into those funds. So in order to basically correct the situation and not be liable for federal penalties, we're actually going to take 2 pay periods, and neither the state nor the employees will pay anything into those funds for those 2 pay periods. It'll add up to a total of $12 million approximately over those 2 pay periods not being put into the funds. So where I come into this and where the Pay Act comes into this is we performed a calculation to see what the general fund impact will be of not paying into the health and dental plans for 2 pay periods. And we came up with a number of $4.1 million as the impact to the state's general fund. There will be a savings of $4.1 million based on that premium holiday for the first 2 pay periods. Then the question came about, how do we actually build this into the budget? And so the way we came up with to technically facilitate that $4.1 million savings was to reduce the amount of Pay Act appropriations to the executive, judicial, and legislative branches in amounts that would be appropriate estimates for what would have been paid in those first 2 pay periods. So what's really happening is we're saying the amount that will need to be appropriated for increased salary pressure in FY22 will be offset to a certain degree by less benefits costs, and we're building that into this part of that. That's how we're building it into the budget, is reducing the Pay Act appropriations. The exact way we're doing that is we're reducing the appropriation to the executive branch by about $3.8 million. We're reducing the appropriation to judiciary by about $300,000, and we're reducing the appropriation to the legislative branch by about $34,000 to account for the $4.1 million savings. So I'll pause and take a breath and answer any questions.
Yes, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Merrill, I'm assuming that an individual employee will be aware that what looks like a pay raise, in essence, because less is being taken out, will only be for those 2 pay periods, and that things will revert back to normal after that, and that there won't be some sort of anguish like, oh my gosh, I thought I got a pay raise and now they took it away again. So is it clear to the individual employee?
I see, oh, the whole bottom row on my screen probably has answers. I see Beth's hand.
Yeah, we will notify those employees so that they are aware prior to the pay period where that's going to happen,
Thank you.
typically.
So are there any other questions here about that?
I can add that the amounts for the health plans, which are most popular with the state employees, the amount of the 2 pay period premium holiday for someone with single coverage, that'll be worth $160 over the 2 pay periods. For someone with family coverage, it would be $441 in terms of the value, the increase that will be in the paycheck.
So I did notice that both judiciary and executive branch people who didn't get a raise last year are getting a little lump sum of 1.9% to make up for that lack of increase last year, but the legislative branch is not getting that. And does that apply to, I don't know if all our employees, it applies to the exempt people who didn't get an increase, but we apparently didn't get an increase either. And we're not getting our little $109 that we would get in a lump sum if we got that increase. But that's just an observation. I'm not going to argue about $109.
But what I'm just curious, that's not our legislative council or our JFO.
No, they're covered by,
So
they're
we're not
covered.
So legislators not only don't get any benefits, none, we also aren't getting that 1.9% increase?
No, it wasn't. I thought you said, I don't even know if we got an increase last year in our base pay as legislators because it's so little that I don't pay that much.
We got zip.
Okay, so the exempt executive and judiciary people who didn't get an increase are getting a 1.9% lump sum to make up for that from last year, but we aren't. Just an observation. It would amount to about $109, I think. Beth?
I think the language for the executive branch is just for the constitutional officers.
Oh, just constitutional.
The other executive branch employees in the budget last year, the legislature did authorize that 1.9% increase.
So it's just the constitutional officers and some judges who didn't get the increase.
I'm not sure for the judiciary exactly who this applies to. I think there may be more than just judges.
Okay. So Steve, do you want to weigh in on this at all? I'm aware that we are going to have our first Cannabis Control Board nominee interview in 9 minutes. So.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to weigh in and say that the members of the VSEA fought a really hard battle to try to get you an increase in year 1, and Beth didn't think you should have it. So I just wanted to be on the record, making clear whose side I'm on, at least.
Guys, I'm sorry, but when did you ever listen to the executive director of the VSEA? This is not the time. I've never weighed in on anything like that. Nor would be my place to weigh in on that. Oh my God.
I think I would only just say besides the fact that the members of the VSEA also are on record saying that legislators should receive retirement benefits and should receive health care.
Okay, enough.
I will also add that we are supportive of the Pay Act as you have it before you, and as I think the administration will or has testified, and we encourage you to adopt it.
Thank you. And Beth, would you like to speak for the administration in general terms about support?
Yes, this is the collective bargaining agreements we entered into actually prior to the pandemic in the fall of 2019 that support the pay raises for employees in the fiscal year 21 and 22. And we were very happy to get an agreement with the VSEA and the Vermont Troopers Association at the bargaining table. It was the first time actually in several bargaining sessions. So that was a good outcome, and we're pleased to be able to support this contract and the Pay Act.
Great. Any questions, Amron?
I just wanted to have something on the record that was brought up prior to our coming in today. There was a typo when this language was moved from the bill before into the big bill. So right now it looks like the AHS department head has a salary of $15,000 in here. It should be 115. Joint Fiscal Office is aware of the typo, so it's going to be corrected. But I wanted to make sure that that's on the record, that is in fact a mistake that happened when the language was moved from one bill into the big bill.
We were thinking that showed solidarity with the legislature.
Any more questions, comments, concerns? And I guess we could have Pat Gable just come in and weigh in, where we are supposed to get this to the Appropriations Committee by tomorrow so that they can vote it out on Tuesday. So I'm trying to figure out how to get her to come in. What we need to hear from them, I guess, is that they support the Pay Act as it's written, and just maybe she can, committee, I don't know if we need her to come in or if we can just have her send the formulas for the probate judges and the sheriffs and how that works. Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you and I are thinking alike. I was going to suggest that rather than have her feel obligated to come in and appear, she could just send an email saying that they did support the Pay Act. And I would appreciate the breakdown on the that formula to it. I know there's a good reason for it. I mean, I'm guessing it has to do with workload and that kind of thing, but
it does, and I can't remember the formula. Yeah.
But I don't feel, at least personally, I don't feel a need for her to have to come in and make any sort of appearance if she just wants to let us know, because I think the five of us are fine with what's here.
Yeah, but okay. It's one of our few county things, and having been discussing county and municipal with ARPA, it would just be interesting to know.
Yep.
No, I'm not saying that we wouldn't find out, Allison, just that she doesn't need to come in and appear.
Yes, we'll ask her. We'll ask her to send it to us. Senator Polina?
I was just going to agree that I think having her send it to us would be fine. We could always get the explanation some other time. We don't need the explanation now.
Right. Senator Rahm, I realize that you were with another committee, but we just went through this and everybody seems supportive of passing on the Pay Act as it's written.
Mm-hmm. I feel like if the other guests here also agree on that, then I'm pretty satisfied. So
yeah,
we'll fill you in on all the robust conversation.
Beth, did you have a last comment here?
Yes, I would recommend to the committee that they also get a similar letter from the state's attorneys and sheriffs. The agreement with the Vermont State Employees Association is actually with that bargaining unit is not with the executive branch. It's signed by the attorneys and sheriffs. So
okay, good thought. We'll get that also. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And we are going to shift gears a little bit here and have interviews of our 3 cannabis control nominees, Cannabis Control Board nominees. So, thank you. All right. So committee, we're first going to do Kyle. And let me see where my.
He has not joined us yet.
Okay,
So
yeah, he
should be
has a
here
couple minutes, I think.
in the next couple of minutes.
Does anybody have any questions first, I guess, about how we how these people were appointed? I don't know if
Weren't you on the committee that appointed them?
Mhm.
I mean, the nominated.
the governor got about 90 applications for the 3 positions. They then weeded it down to about 45 or 46, sent it to the nominating committee, and that was Chris Pearson, myself, John Gannon, Janet Ansel, Nick Lopez from HR, Anson Tebbets, and Sabrina Haskell. And we went through, ranked them so that there were some who were definitely at the top, some who were definitely at the bottom, and we interviewed 14 people and forwarded 10 names. Kyle, I was just going through the process that we went through to, and then those names were sent to the governor, and then the governor appointed the 3 people from that list. So I was on the nominating board. You probably don't remember, but because I'm sure that was a stressful interview. But
you were one of the many great faces and folks that I spoke to as I've maneuvered my way through the process.
So, sorry, Jeanette, can I just clarify? You sent 11 names up to the governor's office?
10.
10.
Yes.
Jeanette, can I ask were any of them people of color?
I am not going to say who we interviewed or who we didn't interview. I think that's if the governor wants to release who the names of who was sent up to him, I think that's his. But we have been very careful about not naming any names at all, about names that we interviewed or names that we sent.
And can you say again who was on the nominating committee?
Chris Pearson, myself, Janet Ansel, John Gannon, Nick Lopez from HR. He's an attorney in HR. Janet, Sabrina Haskell, and Anson Tebbets. They were the 3 governor appointees, and then 2 from the House and 2 from the Senate.
Wow.
And they were primarily people who'd worked on the cannabis bill that were from the House and the Senate. So, all right, let's get started here with Kyle. So, do you want to, we'll just ask you some questions. We've allotted about 20 minutes. And if you just want to give us a little short background about yourself and why on earth you would want to take on this big job.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks to everybody here.
Wait, let me introduce ourselves first, because I apologize. Sometimes I'm so used to what, Senator Clarkson?
I said we haven't met.
I know, that's what I'm, sometimes I'm so used to people, the same people coming in. So I'm Jeanette White, I'm from Windham County, we've met, so. Anthony, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm Anthony Polina from Washington County.
Ryan Collmore from Rutland County.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor District.
Keisha Ram, Chittenden County.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Well, first, I can start by saying, Senator Collmore, I certainly remember you. I think one of my first weeks at the Ag Agency, I toured some dairy farms with you, and I remember giving you a ride back to your car, and we talked extensively about hockey because I'm a Capitals fan, and I remember correctly, you're a big Bruins guy. So
you have a good memory, Kyle.
And he's a referee.
That's right. I remember that conversation as well. So I'm Kyle Harris. I'm originally from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. My dad's a veterinarian. My mother is a dietitian. I've always really had an ag and public health focus in my background, my interests in my work. I went to the College of Charleston in South Carolina, got a Bachelor of Arts degree in history with a classical civilizations minor down there. Far cry away from working prospectively in cannabis work, but I've always kind of approached, like I went to Vermont Law School after the College of Charleston. I thought that program fit well with what I wanted to do. About midway through college, I decided I want to get more into environmental issues, natural resource issues. With a history degree, that was a little challenging and didn't want to backtrack too much at an undergraduate level. Fortunately, I thought my skill sets from a researching, writing perspective and my interest in the environment and natural resources really mirrored a lot of the different types of programs that Vermont Law School affords somebody, depending on how specific they want to get into an area of law. I graduated from Vermont Law School in 2015 with a JD, a Master's in Environmental Law and Policy. I also achieved a certificate in water law. Was always interested in agriculture and kind of how we interact with our land, where public policy and the law really meet in understanding how businesses work within the bounds of our law, but also we strive and craft policy to make sure that everybody's on the same page and we can protect our natural resources while protecting our business interests as well. I took and passed the bar in Maryland. I have a license to practice there. I lived for about four or 5 years in DC. My job previous to the one I'm in now at the Agency of Agriculture was working for the Corn Refiners Association, representing about 14% of the US corn supply. Was in ethanol, a lot of starches, sweeteners. And what I was trying to accomplish down there in my role was increase focus on bioplastics, bioproducts, trying to move corn into more of a 21st century agricultural portfolio versus how they've traditionally made money over the last 50 years or so. So I kind of moved. I'm not sure if anybody here has seen my resume. I moved from manager to director to associate counsel of environmental affairs. I also managed all of our transportation issues and our workforce, workplace safety issues as well. And one of the cool things that I did down there is I helped launch the Plant-Based Products Council, which takes a feedstock agnostic approach and looking at all of our different agricultural products that we grow here in the US and trying to be a source of connection to help growers find processing and end products from a feedstock agnostic approach, and also connect consumers and companies that are looking to really move in the plant-based product market and understand how it all works. And of course, part of that whole process was through an advocacy lens as well inside the Beltway. Did a lot of work on the farm bills over the course of at least 2 farm bill cycles. My time there was spent at the tail end of one and really ramping up into the last one that was issued. I think, working inside the Beltway was very fun. I met a lot of really great people. I have still a lot of love and respect for colleagues that are still working there. I think one of the things that was lost on me was actually feeling a real tangible sense of community when it came to my work. It's easy to kind of feel lost in what you're doing and not really seeing it and how it affects your next door neighbor. And I really wanted to get back to that sense of community. In trying to figure out what my next step was, the Agency of Agriculture, and in coordination with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, posted an ag development specialist position focused on emerging issues in economic development. I felt my skill set and some of the stuff that I had done in DC fitted well. I was fortunate enough to receive an offer, and my wife and I decided, let's go for it. Let's move back to Vermont and see what kind of impact we can make for a state that I fell in love with, quite frankly, when I was in law school. So the last year and a half, I've been in this position. It's been an absolutely incredible way to learn Vermont, its problems from an agricultural and commercial perspective, the players that are trying to do really great things in this state to move agriculture forward. I was fortunate enough to be on the development team for the Food and Agriculture and Food System Strategic Plan, looking over the next 2021 to 2030. Incredible working with the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund in doing so. And it really taught me a lot about the state. And so when the opportunity to apply for this position, the Cannabis Control Board position, I thought, what a better way to continue to bring something back to my community. And my community, I live in Montpelier, but my sense of community is the state more broadly. And I thought, based off of my skill set, my interest in public health, my interest in agriculture, my interest in a lot of different things that kind of will go into building the foundations of this regulatory program and market. I was certainly interested in carrying, that heavy burden forward. And now I'm here and talking with all of you wonderful people.
Great, thank you. So I'm not going to ask Kyle any questions because I've had an opportunity to ask him questions in the other process. So I would open it up to any committee members if you have questions. Yes, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Kyle, you had the challenge with a history degree. I had a similar situation. I have sociology, anthropology degree, which go figure. So I would be equally not uncomfortable, but challenged, I think, to take a position on the Cannabis Control Board. And I'm wondering, because you guys, the three of you, are going to have to make some pretty important decisions with the help of that advisory committee. But what are a couple of things that you feel you might have to sort of brush up on or learn more about in order to make informed decisions going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think if I look back at all of my degrees, whether it's my history degree, my law degree, my master's in environmental policy degree, it's a tool belt. I've always considered my law degree a tool belt. I've never really wanted to be in the courtroom practicing attorney, but it's given me, every step along the way, it's given me a skill set. I think if I'm going to have to brush up on certain things, and in talking with James and Julie informally, I think we do all have complementary skill sets. I think from an ag policy perspective and a commercial policy perspective, I can help bring a lot of thought and careful guidance into how this is going to affect, certain decisions will affect the Vermont community. But in law school, I won't be shy. They don't give you a lot of the financial skills that would be associated with something like this, from setting permit fees to licensing fees, so on and so forth. That is certainly not in my history degree or law degree, something that was essentially harped on. I'm using a lot of, I've been working professionally for about 6 or 7 years at this point. I've have a demonstrated experience from what I've done in managing budgets, both in DC and managing grants from the federal government for the state of Vermont, but I don't have that formal training. And that's something that I'm certainly going to have to keep an open ear, listen, and take advice when it's necessary to do so.
Okay. I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
What's
Senator Rahm, did you have a question?
I'll let Allison go.
Okay, Senator Clarkson.
Yeah, Kyle, thanks. You're in our son Ward's class at BLS.
Oh, okay. Your Ward good enough's mother.
I am.
Okay.
I am.
Ward should know my name.
Oh, great. Well, I think
he
he's going to be excited you're doing this. I think it's great that you were doing a partnership. You were sort of working with ACCD and ag on economic development issues. And I'd love to see how you see our hemp and cannabis industries. I mean, I assume hemp was something that you were maybe looking at and working on. And how do you see cannabis fitting in, and where do you see it as the growth potential in our economic development sphere?
Yeah, that's a great question. I worked closely with our hemp team at the Agency of Agriculture. I was sort of the business development liaison to that team, but also in doing so with the law degree that I received from BLS, I helped craft comments on USDA's final rule. I've looked at our state plan, which is should be submitted. If Stephanie hasn't already submitted it, should be submitted in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be very, very interesting. I mean, there is this huge boom in interest in growing hemp for CBD purposes, and for a lot of different reasons. It's you start to try and pull at that that thread and untangle that big knot of the reasons why a lot of those promises were not realized. It's one of the big kind of pitfalls that happens when you're really trying to get a commodity market off the ground, from kind of backdoor handshake deals from seed suppliers to folks trying to grow. The same thing happened at the processing level. It was very curious to kind of see, that ship being built as it was being flown for the most part. To me personally, I think the future in hemp is in fiber, not necessarily in CBD. I don't think CBD is a fad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's that short-term money grab versus the long-term investment that I still think that kind of sliding scale needs to be ironed out a little bit. I think it's really, really interesting to see how the hemp program and the high THC cannabis program are going to fit together. There's a lot of issues that could arise from cross-pollination. What happens if a high THC cannabis plot is upwind of a hemp plot, and pollen gets blown to a hemp plot and makes it so that hemp plot is above the 1%, which it could not even be 1%, it could be 0.3% with a margin of error of 0.2%. And that crop could not necessarily be sold into the cannabis market. It would have to be destroyed. So there's going to be a lot of conversations from my perspective and my ag background between folks that are interested in growing cannabis and those that do hemp. If I were to speculate, a lot of our cannabis growers are going to be trying to do so indoors because it's a much more controlled environment when you're really looking to make sure you're at or above certain THC thresholds that are found in the authorizing legislation, and looking at trying to cultivate different strains, whatever you want to, cultivars, whatever you want to call them, to really find successful footing in a high THC cannabis environment. I think there's a lot of lessons learned from how a lot of investment was put forward into the hemp world. I think there will be some growers that are going to have a little bit more they're going to be a little bit more suspect of putting substantial investment without the right guidance, without the right help, without understanding what all of the requirements are going to be before they actually choose to make that investment. And that's why I think, once this process starts to move forward, one of the first orders of business should be finding enough security for our growers to really start to move the needle here. I think a lot of the focus has been on storefronts, municipalities, dispensaries, so on and so forth. But one of my hopeful focuses is to be keeping as much of this product in state, not just from a tax revenue perspective, but helping our farmers, our growers, those interested in being part of this community, to have the first shot at really making money in this business.
Thank you. Thank you. So Senator Rahm, did you have a question? And I will remind us that we have about 5 minutes left.
Right. I'll just try to ask the same two questions of all three candidates. Mr. Harris, what's your perspective on the way that the criminalization of cannabis has harmed certain marginalized communities, and how you work to undo that harm in your role on the board? And two, when you look at the advisory board that's being assembled, what perspectives would you be looking for that balance your own, that help you have a well-rounded perspective on how to move forward on cannabis control?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the questions. From my perspective and my background, it's incredibly unfortunate the way and the trends that have happened with cannabis over the last 20 to 30 years. I mean, I'm a white male in his early 30s. And I certainly recognize that if I were to partake in this versus somebody who's a person of color, depending on their financial background, whatever you want to call it, we're looked at differently. And what I'm going to try and do is make sure that this program in the state of Vermont is an equitable one, an accessible one, that everybody has a fair shake. And that fair shake is going to mean that certain things are looked at, excuse me, differently, depending on who's interested in at what point in the process they're trying to enter this marketplace, whether it's from a growing perspective, processing perspective, trying to open their own storefront or dispensary, or just being a user. I think that there's good and bad examples of other state programs around the country that have tried to solve this issue. I think some have tried to do so post hoc, and it's been an embarrassment. I think there is some good examples of states that have really worked to incorporate a lot of the concerns that I would imagine you may have, and that we all have, into the program initially. I think one of the challenges here, though, is because of Vermont's demographics, because if you're looking at it on a not per capita basis, but on a strictly number basis, there's an argument to be made that there isn't the same number of folks that have been affected by the war on drugs as there have been in, say, the Chicago area. So crafting the correct questions when somebody goes for a permit is going to be challenging, because you're not going to get the same responses that you're going to get if you're outside of one of these major metro markets around the country that have really experienced the real hardships associated with that. That being said, there has been a lot of these issues in Vermont, and I'm not trying to downplay those by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to be a careful balance. We've got to listen. I think that's one of our first orders of business, is listening, understanding why some folks feel so strongly in opposition to this legislation that authorized this program, and trying to work as a bridge through the regulatory process to address some of those concerns. From an advisory perspective, I'm going to be very thankful for the advisory committee's approach here. I think, in addition to, and I'm sorry, I don't have the legislation in front of me. I can't exactly remember which heads of which agencies or designees are going to be part of this advisory council. But I think there needs to be a lot of folks from all ends of the spectrum that are going to need to be present in this conversation, whether it's BIPOC, the BIPOC community, the grower community, people from the municipal levels, the regional planning commissions, all of our agencies that really, from an educational perspective, a public health perspective, a health perspective, agriculture, ACCD, the Department of Public Safety. I think the more voices are, the better. And I think one of the things that I've always been able to do is, through my work, is listen to people, meet people where they're at, understand why people feel a certain way, and try to be a bridge to understanding why certain things have to move in a certain direction.
Thank you. Thank you. That was right on time. You were very, very judicious with your answers. So thank you very much, but they were clear, I felt. So any last minute question, comment, Kyle?
None for me. I look forward to hopefully working with everybody here moving forward. I'm really excited. I know there's a lot of really hard work ahead of us prospectively, but I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm ready to get to work. Trying to launch something like this is something that I'm just really excited for. And I think one of my main goals is making something that all Vermonters and folks across the country can be proud of. Whether or not you choose to take place in this marketplace or not, that's a different conversation. But is this a program that you can be proud of? And that's really where I'll hang my hat, hopefully in the next couple of years.
Great, thank you. And our process is that we will have a conversation among ourselves, and then we will forward to the whole Senate for confirmation. And we would, since we're already so far behind our timeline, it's imperative that we get this going soon. And I understand that as of today or Monday, you guys are on the payroll, so get going.
Yeah, I cleaned out my desk at ACCD. I cleaned out my desk at Ag. I'm doing my exit interviews tomorrow with the intention of starting on Monday. So
Great.
And where are you guys going to be remote?
I believe to start we're remote through till June, but I think that BGS has found space for us on Baldwin Street.
Yeah.
Great. We look forward to seeing you closer at hand.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good luck, Kyle.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I guess we can let Julie in. I'll be better about introductions this time.
You were great. You were fine.
Hi, Julie.
Hello.
So thank you for coming. I'm going to start by having us introduce ourselves, although I think you know us all from other positions, but just to be, for people out there listening, they might want to know that we are introducing ourselves to you. So I'm Jeanette White from Windham County.
I'm Anthony Polina from Washington County.
Brian Collmore from Rutland County.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Keisha Ron, Chittenden County.
Great. So thanks, Julie, for coming over, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
So if you want to give us just a short, we have about 20 minutes. And if you want to give us just a short background of yourself and then why you think that you want to do this in the first place. And then I'm going to turn it over to the other committee members because I've already been able to ask you questions.
Sure. Thank you all for taking the time to speak with me today. It's nice to sit before you again, although in a different capacity than I have in the past. You know me as the now former chair of the Vermont State Ethics Commission. I've also sat on my local select board and rec advisory committee, and have been in human resources for about 20 years, most recently with the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. And prior to that, about 12 years in municipal government, working for both the city of Burlington and the city of Winooski. I went to NVU Johnson back when it was still Johnson State College. When I decided to do some graduate work, I intentionally chose to go back to NVU to do that graduate work. And I'm a certified human resources professional. I have 2 certifications that require a pretty extensive test to achieve. So that's sort of a short history of me.
And why did you want to jump into this fire?
Sure. So of the things that I have done, the thing I have enjoyed most about all of those roles is the ability to participate in creation of policy, whether it was writing policy myself as a human resources person in municipal government or contributing to policy somewhere else. That's always been something that I've really enjoyed. I think that there's no secret that this will be both exciting and engaging work, and I'm really looking forward to doing that work. And I think that this is an opportunity for Vermont. I mean, regulating cannabis will not cure all of the ills of the past, right? It will not erase what has occurred. But if we spend the time to be inclusive, to be careful about restorative practices, and to properly introduce regulation, we can do something better for the future. And I think that's what I'm most looking forward to contributing to.
Great. Thanks. Committee? Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Julie. So this may seem like a weird question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You're going to sit on a 3-member board and have an advisory, I think we called it council, but it might have been a committee sort of underneath you, giving you direction. If you were in our position, would you have done the same thing in terms of setting it up that way? In other words, do you see this as a pretty good system going forward to on which to operate, or would you have made the board maybe a little bigger? Or I'm just kind of curious because we struggled a little bit to come up with what we thought was a legitimate way to take this project on.
So without having an opportunity to really think about what other states have done, I've done some research in that area, but not enough to really fully answer your question. What I do like about this system is that it does provide some flexibility. So we have this 3-member board, which has longer appointments, and the legislature could pretty easily add to the advisory committee as we find different areas that this board needs advice on. So I think that you've proposed some of that in S25, but there's also an extensive advisory committee. So I think that there's an opportunity to extend that as we understand more about who the stakeholders are and who needs to have input. I think the system, the way it's set up, does provide some flexibility.
Thank you.
Senator Polina, I saw your hand.
Sure, thank you. I've sort of a two-part question. One is, there was a lot of enthusiasm about hemp a couple of years ago. And I'm wondering if you could talk about any lessons learned from hemp, which has not turned out quite the way we wanted it to, and what we can do to try to make sure that this is a Vermont-based industry in the future and not taken over by others.
So I'll answer the first part of your question first. I think what I recall about the excitement around hemp is that there were a lot of people who were ready to grow hemp, but then there wasn't a place for it to be processed, and there were crops that went unused. So the next step then is, how do we encourage people to start production in Vermont and start, whether it's small businesses or medium-sized businesses that can employ people, particularly in a post-pandemic or nearing a post-pandemic economic recovery. How can we entice people into that industry who may not have thought about it? And where can we go to find those folks? Because it may or may not be people who already have experience with hemp. It may be people who are in Vermont that have other experience that they can draw from. So that's, I think, my answer to the first part of your question. Can you ask the second part of your question again?
Well, just how we can assure ourselves that this will be a Vermont-based industry in the future.
So I think it's by encouraging Vermonters to get involved in the industry and making it accessible and understandable. When we write regulations, the average Vermonter is going to need to be able to understand that regulation, because if they don't, they'll shy away from this, right? Either they will shy away from moving from the illicit market into the regulated market, or if they have any interest in starting up in the regulated market, they won't do it if they can't understand it. So outreach and education for, I think, the Cannabis Control Board will be paramount to including Vermonters and encouraging Vermonters to get involved in this industry.
Great, thanks. Anybody, Senator Ron?
Well, I just told the last person I'd ask the same questions because I think it's important. It's nice to see you, Julie. And I just add one small question to yours, which is if you are leaving your role on the Colchester Select Board, if everyone has to leave sort of elected roles for this, which is sad for Colchester, but maybe critical for your work. And then, so my two questions are as you think about the ways that communities have been marginalized by the criminalization of cannabis and how that's impacted some over others, what do you see your role as rebalancing that harm or repairing that harm being on the board? And what perspectives will you be looking for from the advisory board that complement your lived experience?
Sure. Yes, I did have to resign my role on the Colchester Select Board. That seemed the most appropriate action, and to be able to fully engage in this and to avoid any conflicts of interest. And then, I've thought about, not your question specifically, but this issue a lot in this process and in getting close to this particular period of time where we may start. And I've actually thought back a lot to the work that you and I did collaboratively in the city of Winooski, because it was probably the realest and most honest work related to equity and inclusion that I have ever done. And part of that was because we were able to have really honest and real conversations about race, power, and privilege and how it impacts our community. And I think a lot of that applies here. The reason why we were able to have those conversations because it was collaborative. We included people who were from all parts of the community and all faiths and all ages, from high school students to seniors. And it allowed us to have real conversations and include a variety of perspectives. And quite a bond was created in that group, and they continue to share those perspectives. So I've been trying to map out, and I may not have completely figured out how to do this yet, but how to apply that learning in this role, or that lens to this role. And I think probably the most obvious is to apply it to collaboration with the advisory committee and any other stakeholders in this industry. So that's what I've been thinking about going forward. I don't know if I'll have the answer until we get into the work, but that is what I have been thinking about in this process. And then in terms of the advisory committee, my hope is that it represents a variety of people, both in the perspectives that they bring related to the industry, and then the lived perspectives that they bring as well. That's my hope.
Thanks, Julie. Well, I'm biased about our past work, but I appreciate you naming it as a process, an ongoing, process of always hearing unheard voices.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
So my colleagues have such good questions, and I wasn't as clear on my questions for you, but I guess I'm interested in what you're most excited about with this new opportunity.
I really enjoyed building the Ethics Commission from the vacant office that we saw just after our first meeting. That was really interesting and exciting work. And I'm excited about doing the same thing here, but as a full-time job, which is, if you can do what you are most interested in doing as a full-time job, I think that's that would make me pretty lucky, I guess.
And where do you, because you prefaced your remarks by saying how excited you were about policy and creating policy, and we appreciate that. We're policymakers and lawmakers, so we can appreciate that enthusiasm. Where do you see the greatest opportunity with regulated, taxed and regulated cannabis?
I think it's the
greatest opportunity for Vermont at the moment with this.
Yeah, I think it's in including people who have been disparately impacted by the previous prohibition of cannabis. We know that on average, that includes people of color and people who've been economically disadvantaged, and we have an opportunity to include those people. I noticed that the Northeast Kingdom, several towns in the Northeast Kingdom have already adopted or opted in. And I also noticed that the Northeast Kingdom is a place that's economically disadvantaged. So is this an opportunity for the Northeast Kingdom to repair some of that economic disadvantage?
Senator Palmer.
Just a very quick comment, Julie. If you would let Larry Novins know that we bumped him today.
I know.
We were going to be talking about the ethics.
Yes,
Larry Novins, I am so sorry. I did notice that when the agenda changed, and I sort of feel bad, but I'm glad to be with you.
Well, just apologize for us.
So, Julie, our process here is that we will have some conversations among ourselves, and then we will forward our names to the full Senate for confirmation. And I believe our goal is to have these confirmations acted on as soon as possible. So, because we understand you're already about 4 months behind your schedule. So we don't want to delay that any further, but I understand that you are now officially on the state, or will be on the state payroll, and will start working. And so great.
Well, that is lovely to hear. Yes, since I left my current job about 15 minutes ago. So
wow. Good.
I appreciate the procedure update.
Thank you. Any last comments or questions?
I appreciate the fact that Julie went to Johnson State College before it was transformed into the Northern Vermont University, and then chose to go back there for graduate work as well. That's where I graduated from as well. It's a good place.
I actually remember, Senator Polina, I was on the student government. So you came and spoke to us several times in those days.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So thank you, Julie, and we will be back to you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So before we let have Pepper come in, I just have to comment that Julie is the sparsest with her language of anybody while saying what she has to say. I mean, she doesn't add in words. She doesn't go off. She is right there.
Maybe that's the HR background. I didn't want to be too flowery, but all the institutions that she's leaving are it's their loss but it's our gain and the state's gain for her to do this.
Yeah, she was the very same in the interview. We allowed, I think, half an hour for the interviews, and it took like 20 minutes because she answered everything just like that. So I just needed to say that because she'll be great on that committee, keeping them on task. And all right, well, do we have Pepper with us? in the
We
waiting
do
room?
have Pepper in the waiting room, and I will invite him to the meeting.
Okay, we're a little ahead of schedule, but that's okay.
And actually, Rebecca Wasserman has a hard stop at 4:15 today.
Okay,
So if we do start a little early, she would be open to starting early.
great. Okay. All right, so good afternoon. So welcome to Senate Government Operations, Pepper. And we're just, because we need to do it, we will introduce ourselves, although I'm sure you are familiar with all of us. I'm Jeanette White from Windham County.
Hi, I'm Anthony Polina, Washington County.
Brian Collmore, Rutland County.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Keisha Rom, Chittenden County.
So Pepper, what I'm going to do is I am going to just ask you a question, and then I'm going to just shut up and let other people ask you questions, because I've had an opportunity to ask you questions on the nominating committee. So just give us a little brief background. We have about 20 minutes, a little brief background about yourself and why you wanted to jump into this unknown world and learn by fire.
Sure, happy to. And I just have to thank you all for taking the time to fit us into your schedule. I know you have a lot of competing priorities and that legislative clock is ticking. So I'll try and be brief. But I graduated from college and immediately went to work on the Obama campaign in New York City. For most of 2007 and 2008, and then moved to Washington, D.C. afterwards to work at the Democratic National Committee, where I met my wife, who is a native Vermonter. And, we really got dispirited with the way that the kind of national politics was moving. Citizens United was decided while we were kind of working in D.C., and we saw kind of these AstroTurf organizations come to dominate the political dialogue. And so we decided that we wanted to move back to the best place to raise a family and really kind of dig into policy work. So after the midterm elections in 2010, she took an interview with Governor-elect Peter Shumlin, got a job with him, and I applied to Vermont Law School. And that brought us both back to Vermont, which has been a delightful place to raise a family, just as we have learned in the past couple of years. My wife and I had twin boys in 2018. Since then, I've really dug into marijuana policy, cannabis policy. If you believe the statistics, with 80,000 Vermonters admitting to using cannabis within the last month, with the kind of perception of harm of this product on the decrease among our youth, and with just high school students on their kind of annual report saying that it's easier to get cannabis or marijuana than it is to get alcohol or tobacco. It just really kind of highlights the need to have a safe, regulated, packaged, labeled, tested product. And if we can, at the same time, use some of that revenue to reinvest in education and prevention and substance use treatment, we're all the better for it as a state. So I dug into this policy as deeply as I could. I worked very closely with you, Senator White, and with Senator Sears and Senator Benning, Tim Ash, to really craft what we thought was a great bill. It passed the Senate, and in 2015, 2016. It wasn't perfect. Certainly there was, at that point, because we were so early in kind of the legalization and tax and regulate trajectory in the United States, that there was probably an overemphasis on law enforcement and probably not enough emphasis on social equity and economic empowerment. But I can say that as one of the very few, probably I think the only state that hasn't done tax and regulate through a ballot initiative, and it's done it through the legislative process. That bill and what ultimately passed and got over the finish line in Act 164 has been a tremendous improvement. And I think that it's a work in progress, and I'm sure we'll be back with certain clarifying requests or kind of new initiatives, but it is something that I felt passionately about for a number of years now.
Great, thanks. Committee? Anybody have a question? Senator Rom.
I have had two for the other folks as well. I also actually have a third one for you based on something you brought up that I wrestle with as well. So I'll start with that one. If it's okay, Madam Chair, if I ask 3 questions.
Yeah, sure, please.
That gives people time. But, you were talking about the kind of, this being regulated by default. Vermonters are already using cannabis, et cetera, to self-medicate. I was really fascinated when I went to Portugal that as they've decriminalized all drugs, they still haven't legalized marijuana because they see legalization as very different than decriminalization. And their philosophy is that if you believe that, substance use is a disease, then you wouldn't legalize something so you can tax it and make money from it and sort of commercialize it as a commodity. You would treat people for it. So, when you brought that up, it made me think about what would your sort of balance be in thinking about how we make sure we still treat addiction as a disease while also recognizing that a lot of Vermonters use cannabis both recreationally and to self-medicate.
Great question. And I'm not an expert on Portugal. I know that, their process of decriminalization happened over, a number of decades. And as they started to kind of take the pressure off and decriminalize larger and larger amounts of personal use, that they also built up an infrastructure that allowed for treatment and prevention and education. And I think that's why they never fully legalized some of the quote unquote harder drugs, because they still want this ability to have kind of a public health approach to people that are using the kind of harder drugs. And with marijuana or with cannabis, I think it's a slightly different story. I think that what you really need is kind of to tell the truth about the kind of the impacts of marijuana, particularly on the developing brain. And I think that, it's not quite as addictive potentially or habit forming as some of the other harder drugs. And I think that when you have kind of prohibition, which has shown itself, I don't think it's any stretch to be a failure of a policy, that, you start with what kind of how we have in Vermont, which is start slow, decriminalize, create civil penalties, then get rid of the civil penalties, and then allow for small amounts of home grow, and then allow for legalization. Kind of that slow approach that Portugal really took in trying to, get the balance right. As you normalize a substance, whatever that substance is, then you're going to have that perception of harm decrease. And I think that it's important as that is happening, that you provide the kind of educational services and prevention services alongside that normalization.
Thanks. So my 2 questions that I've asked all of our candidates are what your perspective would be on the disproportionate harm that's occurred in the criminalization of cannabis among marginalized communities, and how you see your role on the board working to repair the harm that's been disproportionately done to certain communities. And the second question being, what perspectives are you looking for on the advisory board that balance your own lived experience?
Sure. So certainly, I don't think it's, again, any stretch, I've already touched on it, that the kind of war on drugs and prohibition has been a failed policy, and it's led to disparate arrests. It's led to second and third order impacts to communities of color because of criminal history records. In fact, I think Senator White, most of my work in the judiciary committees and with the state's attorneys has been focusing on de-emphasizing the role that criminal history records play, eliminating them to the extent we can. I think, the most recent statistics that I have show that we've expunged over 25,000 criminal convictions in the last 3 years. And that doesn't include the mandatory automatic expungement of all cannabis/marijuana possession charges under 2 ounces, which, if I remember, there's 17,000 historic convictions on that regard. But that doesn't, all the work that we've done there on bail reform, on raising the age, on justice reinvestment, does not include an economic empowerment angle, which I think is the kind of second prong of actually addressing the war on drugs or prohibition. And I think that our work with cannabis policy through the board can really focus on empowering historically marginalized or communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs by offering as many economic opportunities and advantages to people that have been harmed. The second question about the advisory committee, I actually really like the structure that's set up in Act 164 with the advisory committee. I certainly don't have an expertise in much of what we're tasked with doing. I hate to say that in this interview, but when I was originally devising kind of a structure for cannabis, I actually had something much more akin to the advisory committee running the whole program. There was no commission. So it had kind of a hierarchy in a way, where either the commissioner of public safety, at the time when we didn't really know what the kind of public safety impacts would be, and they were running the medical program at the time, so they had a lot of the regulations in place, was going to be at the top. But we also considered putting the Secretary of Agriculture or the Commissioner of Department of Tax or the Commissioner of the Department of Health at the kind of top of the hierarchy, or having a rotating position at the top, and then having an advisory committee of the cabinet to advise all aspects of this, because really, this can have the ability to touch all aspects of state government. And so what I'm very hopeful about is that in my conversations with the governor and with Suzanne Young, Secretary Young, and also just with the kind of initial steps that I've taken to help to try and set up this board, it's an all hands on deck approach. Everyone has been incredibly helpful. Everyone has anticipated our needs and has started getting the ball rolling. And I think that some of the non-state agencies that are represented on the board will be just incredibly helpful in ensuring that we hold our own feet to the fire and fulfill the kind of promises that are in Act 164 around economic empowerment and social equity.
Yes, Senator Clarkson.
Pepper, thank you for agreeing to take on the chairship of this. It's great that you're doing this, having followed it all so closely. I'd sort of like to know what you view as your biggest challenges right out of the gate. What do you view as sort of the biggest? What are the biggest challenges you face?
Well, this isn't the first time I've been asked that question. I'll preface it by that. So I do kind of have 3 interrelated challenges in mind right out of the gate. One, of course, is meeting the timelines that are set out in Act 164. I personally believe they were somewhat aggressive to begin with, not even accounting for some of the delays that we have in these appointments. And then you can tack on complications around complying with public meeting laws, just setting up this new industry, the need for potential legislation or legislative approval for some of our decisions, ensuring adequate grow time before this October 1st deadline, October 1st, 2022 deadline. We're also on March 1st taking on the medical program and the 4,600 patients that are part of that. And there's a whole different set of needs in that's separate and above from the adult use program. And then, moving too quickly in this area can be a detriment to the kind of small cultivators and the social equity applicants that we're trying to empower. And, and then a related concern also is we just really, when we're trying to do a market analysis to determine licenses and potential grow caps and things along that nature, really trying to take into account the larger picture of cannabis regulation, both among our neighboring states and with respect to what's going to happen federally. If there was, it's not hard to imagine a few years down the road that cannabis will be legalized federally. And then what does that mean for Vermont's industry? And, if there's concentrated grows in Colorado, what is Vermont's kind of primary competitive advantage that allows this market to sustain itself? And I think it's going to be, much like the beer industry, kind of our Vermont product has a lot of heft to it, and also our craft cultivation. Essentially, that's all kind of tied into meeting the timelines and ensuring that we have adequate time to make the right decisions and think thoughtfully about kind of all the challenges ahead. Of course, my second major concern is establishing trust with the Cannabis Control Board. I've been watching some of the deliberations. I think it's fair to say that there's anxiety and skepticism about the Cannabis Control Board and the decisions that we're going to make, and whether we're going to have actual real opportunities for social equity applicants, for small cultivators, that we're going to have pathways for those for the kind of people that have been participating in this industry already, and that have the best practices and know how to operate in this industry. Balancing some of the energy, environmental, land use concerns that go hand in hand with this industry, with the need to reduce the barriers to entry, so that it's not just well-funded, well-financed applicants that are participating. I think the third, and these are all interrelated, is how to deal with the social equity piece. We've seen models both in Illinois and Massachusetts that have not been particularly effective in attracting diverse candidates or applicants. I think Massachusetts has been the most prolific in their efforts. And yet, when you look at the makeup of the industry, it's 70% white males that are license holders. And they've done almost everything that's being contemplated, with the exception, and I'm not sure where they stand on the kind of exclusivity period. I know they've passed an ordinance or a resolution about exclusivity periods for certain types of delivery licenses, but they've done priority applicants, expedited applicants, fee waivers, license waivers, business development and training programs. So essentially, if we do everything that Massachusetts did, we probably still won't see the kind of results that we're hoping for. But that's not to say we're not going to try. And I think S25 with its development fund, could actually be one piece of this that could offer more pathways into this industry.
Thanks.
Good, thank you. Any other questions, concerns, comments? So Pepper, our goal here is to have a little conversation among ourselves, and then to forward the names to the Senate and to get this taken care of immediately, because I know that you can start working even without confirmation, but it would be nice to have the confirmations behind. So that's our goal.
Well, I just would end where I started by thanking this committee for expediting those appointments and or confirming them. And I can tell you that we are all eager to get to work on this. So it's in some ways long overdue. So thank you very much. And I know your time is valuable.
Well, we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Great.
Good luck.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi to Bo and Wesley.
Yeah. And Ally.
Yeah, and Ally, right? Okay. Committee, we're scheduled to start at 3:30 with Becky, and I know she has a hard stop at 4:15, but do you want to take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
To stand up and
Stand up.
visit a man about a horse and or dog or whoever it is,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Becky, we're taking a 5-minute break.
We've been sitting for 2 hours.
Completely understand.